we are at lesson 2 of our spring fashion, Clothed with Christ series. It's just a little 4-week series. And so I'm going to recap just a little bit about what we did last week. We talked about Adam and Eve and the first sin, which, like every sin, is a twisting of truth. It's a twisting of the word of God until it becomes tangled up in distrust. And I always think that every sin is distrust. If you think about every sin you can think of, if I steal, it means I don't believe God will give me what I need. If I kill, it means I don't believe that God will get revenge for me. If you could go through the whole 10 commandments, it's a matter of not trusting God enough. And so when we sin, and like Adam and Eve's sin, they heard something that they weren't sure about. The serpent said, "Did God really say?" And Eve wasn't sure. She couldn't remember. She didn't know for sure. She said it, but she said a little more than what was actually there. And so we don't know if she really didn't remember, or if she just didn't believe it, or if she distrusted God when she was given that one seed of doubt. We're not really sure what was going on in her mind. In her mind, it became twisted. Didn't really say it, didn't really mean it. And that doubt turned into distraction. Look, there's the fruit. It looks good. It looks like all the other fruit I've been eating. I think it'll be okay. And then that distraction became distrust. She says, "He said I could be like God. I want to be like God. How can I be like God? What is he holding back from me? What is he withholding from me that I could have that he hasn't given me?" And all of a sudden, that tiny bit of doubt turned to distraction, turned to distrust, and became sin. Once she knew good from evil, once she was like God in that one respect, and she wasn't totally like God, but she did become like God in knowing what good and evil was, she also knew which side she was on. All of a sudden she knew, I'm on the wrong side. And she and Adam spoke to each other. They had only 2 options from there: hide or to accept the sacrifice. They didn't know the sacrifice was coming yet, but they could either hide and leave God completely or accept the sacrifice. So God asked, "Where are you?" They were hiding. And then God said, "Who told you?" He didn't tell them they were naked. The serpent didn't tell them they were naked. Who told them? Did they say it to each other? Do we say a lot of wrong things to each other? Do we burden ourselves with some wrong thinking? Burden each other with some of the things we say? And it wasn't God who said it, and it wasn't the serpent that said it. They said, "Oh my goodness, we're naked." And they both looked at each other, "You're naked, you're naked." And all of a sudden they knew that was sin. And so they listened to the serpent who created doubt. They listened to the created rather than the creator. And they listened to their own hearts and their desires instead of God's will. Their attempts to hide were futile, and their attempts to hide their nakedness was flimsy. Remember, we talked about the fig leaf being temporary. It would tear apart real easily. It wasn't going to last more than a day. It's all dry and crunchy after a day. And so you don't want to dress in fig leaves. So God made the first blood sacrifice. He had to kill an animal in order to cover their sin. God provided a way where there was no way, always like he does. And the 2 stories we're going to look at tonight are God providing a way when there is no way. So let's go. I don't know what my belt is doing here, but I'm trying to hide it, and it's coming undone. I don't know. Maybe my pants will fall off while I'm sitting here. Okay, 2 Corinthians 5, verses 1 through 5. We're gonna look at that first. 2 Corinthians 5, verses 1 through 5. Remember that God provides a way where there is no possible way. Those are the two verses we're gonna look at. And that's what we see sort of here in this verse. But we also see that there is a purpose for our being clothed with Christ. Once we are clothed with Christ, we become purposeful in all the things that we do. 2 Corinthians 5, 1 through 5 says, "For we know that if our earthly tent, or our temporary body, which is our house, is torn down, we have a building, or a permanent tent, permanent body, from God, a house not made by hands, eternal in the heavens. For indeed in this tent we groan, longing to be clothed with our dwelling from heaven, since in fact after putting it on, we will not be found naked. For indeed, we who are in this tent groan, being burdened with all the burdens we tell each other, that we tell ourselves, being burdened because we do not want to be unclothed, but to be clothed, so that what is mortal will be swallowed up by life. Now he who prepared us for this very purpose is God, who gave us the Spirit as a pledge." Now that you're clothed with Christ, what is your purpose? Okay, think about in the garden, God prepared clothes for them, and then he gave them a purpose. And in the garden, it was to, and he had to drive them out of the garden, but it was to tend to the animals, tend the ground, raise food, and raise some babies. And that's what they did. I think that most of the time, we only know what our purpose is in retrospect. Can you look back at your life and tell all the places you've been and all the things you've done and see how they led up to this very moment? Can you walk back through your life and see that? As a coach's wife, my husband was a coach for 33 years. He's just retired. I can see where every step of our path took us, and where every step of our path, we left things where we had been, and we took things with us too. We took a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, a lot of things with us, and we left some things too. There are some things we couldn't explain until just recently, and we just said, why were we there, and why were we doing that? You used to ask that about some places in your life where you say, wow, I don't know what I was doing there, what we were accomplishing. Go on down to the end of the chapter in Second Corinthians. Second or first? Did I say it wrong? Okay, good, because I wrote it down first, second time. 2 Corinthians 5, 20 through 21, and it could be 1 Corinthians, but I think I got it right. 2 Corinthians 5, 20 and 21. "We are, therefore, ambassadors for Christ, as though God were making an appeal through us. We beg you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. He made him who knew no sin to be sin on our behalf, so that we might become the righteousness of God in him." I'm going to try to tell you these two stories, and they're really long, and I hope that I have enough time to do it. One of them will be very familiar, and I'm just going to hit the highlights, because you know how this story goes. The second story, I hadn't ever thought about. Maybe I'd never even read it. I teach Bible in the high school. I teach it at Southland High School. I've been teaching it for 3 years at Seminole High School. And, you know, do you ever think I've read every verse in the Bible, and then you come across one and go, my goodness, where has that story been? I have never read that before. And all of a sudden, it's either brand new, you come to it with brand new eyes, or you really haven't read it before. And maybe this is one I've just never read before. Maybe you know all about it, and it's very familiar to you too. But the first one is super familiar. And I'm just going to read excerpts, and I'll kind of tell you where I am, and you can kind of skim through. Let's go into the story. Okay, let's do this one. All right, Esther is the first story, okay? And she was prepared for a purpose. You think about her life, she was orphaned and taken in by an uncle, which put her in the right place at the right time. She was in captivity, in Babylonian captivity, which turned into Persian captivity. She is the, Mordecai is the great-great-grandson of Kish, who was taken into Babylonian captivity in the first place. So they've been there probably 150 years, I think. Most of the people have gone back home, but some people stayed. So Esther 1, verse 1. So just go to Esther and we will skim through this as fast as we can. And it is a lot of reading, but I think the Bible is the best teacher. And so we're just going to learn from what it says. Esther 1:1 says, this is what happened during the time of Xerxes. And it may say Ahasuerus or something in your Bible, Ahasuerus or Ahasuerus. And so I could say Xerxes, so I'll put in Xerxes because that's really his name too. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes, the Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush, which I believe is Ethiopia. At that time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa, and in the 3rd year of his reign, and I looked it up because I wanted to know how old he was, because I thought, did Esther have to marry this gross old man? And he's really just 31. I thought, well, maybe he was somebody that she could like. Maybe not. I don't know. You would hope she could like him a little bit, but I don't know. So I had to look it up. He was 31 when this happened, when he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials, the military leaders of Persia and Media. So Babylonian Empire has fallen, Persia has come in, and this is the 3rd year of his reign. The princes and the nobles of the provinces were present. Now there was a city. Okay, so now go to Esther 2, verses 5 through 12. I'm really going to try to keep up with you here on this side. Keep at the verses. And I may go a little further than 12. I think I start back up in 15, but I'm going to just tell the story fast. Now there was a citadel of Susa, in the citadel of Susa, a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai. And it gives a list of his ancestors, which just know that he was the great-grandson of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Mordecai had a cousin named Esther, your version may say Hadassah. She had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. I just tried to leave out the redundancies because it says that a couple of times. Verse 8. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, so he is going to try to find a new wife. After that banquet, his wife got banished. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many young women were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Haggai. Don't you wonder if that was voluntary, or were they just all scooped up from town? I don't know if they were practically kidnapped or if they all said, whoa, I would like to be queen, and they volunteered for this. I would guess it's somewhere in the middle. Esther was also taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai, who had charge of the harem. She pleased him and won his favor, and immediately he provided her with beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 female attendants selected from the king's palace and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Every day he walked to and fro near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her. you imagine being the uncle that sent your niece into this situation? And you have to wonder about her every single day, because all of this is probably a little more sexual than we think. And it's all very scary, and I don't know, it's just terrifying to think about having to go into a harem. That's not desirable. Verse 12. Before a young woman's turn came to go to King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments. Who would not like that? It was prescribed for the women. And here are what the 12 months of beauty treatments were. 6 months with oil of myrrh. And 6 months with perfumes and cosmetics. Wow, that's a lot of oil of myrrh. And you think, did they bathe in it? You just think, what is that? What does that even mean? Were the cosmetics tattoos and we needed time for that to heal? You know, I don't know. Think about what the cosmetics might have been. So she has a full year. She goes into the harem. She's given these 7 attendants. She's moved into the best place. Her uncle checks on her every day because she has to be prepared for a solid year. And you think about all the times that you wish something would happen immediately and it doesn't. We're going to find out that it is 4 years later that she actually goes to the king. Okay, so verse 15, and I think I'm still in chapter 2, but I'll try to write it down every time. When the turn came for Esther to go to the king, she asked for nothing other than what Hegai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the harem, suggested. And Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. She was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. So when we began the story, it was the 3rd year of his reign, and now here we are 4 years later in the 7th year of his reign. So Vashti, his wife, was banished after the 3rd year, and here it is 4 years later. And probably Esther has been in the harem that long, but one of those years was just full of bubble baths and perfume and makeup. Verse 17. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. Mordecai then, in the next chapter, or at the end of that one, uncovers a conspiracy of someone who wants to assassinate the king, and he reports it. And these 2 officials who were going to assassinate the king were impaled on poles or hanged on gallows, depending on your version. And all of this was recorded in the annals of the king. So in chapter 3, you can kind of skim along with me. In chapter 3, Haman is promoted and everyone gives honor to him except for Mordecai. And so he begins a process to kill not only Mordecai, but also all of his people, the Jews. The king does not know that his wife Esther is one of the Jews. But Haman tells Xerxes of his plan, and Xerxes is not opposed to it. He goes, okay, whatever you want to do, just do that. So he takes his signet ring and signs the order. And Mordecai, and Haman sends out the message to all the people in the land. The last line of chapter 3, and I think this is very interesting. The last line of chapter 3 says that the city of Susa was bewildered. What is going on? They think, why are we going to kill all the Jews? Why are we going to round them up and kill them? And haven't you asked that a lot lately? Haven't you been bewildered about what's going on in the world? We have been bewildered the last year. And we say, what is going on? In chapter 4, Mordecai lets Esther know what is going on. and she agrees to help, but she's scared. She knows she'll be taking a huge risk. She has been given all the tools she needs to be an ambassador, but she still knows that it's scary to go in. Chapter 4, 9 through 16. They went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law. She says, I can't go because it's the law that if I go in and he doesn't extend the royal scepter to me, then I can be killed. And she says, but 30 days have passed since I was called to go into the king. So she has these 4 years in the harem, probably around 4 years. She has been with the king for a while, but now it's been a month since she has been asked to go in there. And so she's had to show incredible patience. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. Look at Mordecai's faith. He said, we're going to be saved, but you could be the one to save us. But if you're not, then somebody's going to. Wow, what a lot of faith. But you and your father's family will perish, and who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. And I know that that has become a really kind of a battle cry is, how do we know that we're not in the right place at the right time for such a time as this? I've heard a lot of people say, oh, I don't want my grandchildren growing up in this time. And then I've heard the rebuttal, seen the rebuttal on Facebook that said, if you were born in 1900, my grandfather was born in 1901. If you were born in 1900, by the time you were 14, World War I had started. By the time you were 18, the Spanish flu had come. By the time you were, and it just goes on and on, the Depression, World War II, all of the things that happened, and you say, my grandfather was strong enough for that, or my grandchildren not strong enough for that. You think about, we were strong enough to live through the 60s. My goodness. You think about going back in that time. If I was born in 1964, which I just told you how it was. I'm born in 1964. President Kennedy had just been assassinated. Robert Kennedy was about to be assassinated. Martin Luther King was about to be assassinated. Women were burning their bras. The Beatles were coming to America. You just think about all the things that were happening that weren't good. There's never been a time when it's been great, has there? And so to say our grandchildren are going to grow up in this time, okay, let's prepare them for it. They are prepared for such a time as this. We are prepared for such a time as this. We were okay when we had to stay in our houses for a year. It was terrible, but we did it, and now we're out and about, and you just think we were here for such a time as this. So verse 15, chapter 4, then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night and day, and I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I'll perish. If he declares that I should die, then I'll die. She says, I'm brave enough to do it. How often can we say that? So, you know the rest of the story. Esther is welcomed into the king's presence. He does love her. He is glad to see her. She sets up this banquet and has a banquet one day and then a banquet the next day and invites Haman, and he thinks he is so special because he gets to go to this banquet given by Esther. But Haman in all of this is discovered to be evil. And Mordecai's plan succeeds, and Haman is destroyed and impaled on his own pole, or as other versions say, hanged on his own gallows, depending on which version you have. The king could not repeal the law once it was sealed with his ring, but he could allow the Jews to fight for themselves and kill those who would have sought to destroy them. And so they did. The day that they were supposed to be killed, they actually were allowed to fight back. And they killed, I think, 500 the first day. And then Esther said, can we have one more day? And all of Haman's 10 sons were killed as well. And you wonder if, when they all got back together, they didn't repeat the verses from David. Look at Psalm 109, verses 28 through 30. Psalm 109, verses 28 through 30. They could have repeated these. I don't know if they did. I'm sure they did repeat verses. These may not be the ones they said, but these are the ones that I found that I would have said. Psalm 109, 28 through 30 says, while they curse, may you bless. May those who attack me be put to shame. But may your servant rejoice. May my accusers be clothed with disgrace and wrapped in shame as in a cloak. With my mouth I will greatly extol the Lord. In the great throng of worshipers I will praise him. And then they could have gone back to Psalm 30, 10 through 12, where it says, hear, Lord, and be merciful to me. Lord, be my help. You have turned my wailing into dancing. You removed my sackcloth and clothed me with joy, that my heart may sing your praises and not be silent. Lord, my God, I will praise you forever. Okay, so second story is the one that has really sustained me during this whole COVID crisis. And it is just like this, God provided a way where there was no way. Esther was in the right place at the right time to do the right things for God's right and holy purposes. And I always say that's what I want to be. I always want to be in the right place at the right time to do the right things for God's right and holy purposes. And so in 2 Kings, look at 2 Kings, and it's chapters 5, 6, and 7. Really, we're going to be in 7. I'm just going to give you a little background from 5 and 6. And this was a really good little Sunday school flannel board story. Chapter 5, 2 Kings 5. Elisha and his servant are out. And Elisha just has all the confidence in the world. And the servant says, I just don't get it. I don't know how you can be so faithful because we're fixing to lose. And Elisha prays that the servant's eyes are opened. And when the servant looks out again, he sees that they are surrounded by chariots of fire. And he says, those who are with us are more than those who are against us. Okay, so that's chapter 5. So we've got Elisha. In chapter 6, we see that there has been a terrible, terrible famine. And the king, he's a terrible king. He is very confused. He seems very inept. He seems scared to death. He won't do anything. All he does is throw ashes on his head and wear sackcloth and just, he just seems like he doesn't know what to do. And I mean, maybe I would be the same way. I just wouldn't know what to do. So there's this terrible famine. And to give an example of the terrible famine, they tell us one little anecdote in there in chapter 6 about the 2 women who have made an agreement. They are so hungry, they each have a son. And they say, tonight we're going to eat your son, and tomorrow night we'll eat my son. And one of the women comes and tells the king, wow, we made this agreement, and last night we ate my son, but she's not giving her son tonight. Oh my goodness. I think I've read that story. But chapter 6 is full of that terrible story. And the only thing he does is just throw ashes on his head, go around in sackcloth and just go, wow, what's going to happen? I can't imagine. Okay, so go to chapter 7. This is where I want to show you. 2 Kings 7, 1 through 20, the whole chapter. Elisha replied, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Lord says. About this time tomorrow, a seah, or I'll look this up on the internet, and I should believe whatever you read on the internet, but the best I could find was that's 12 pounds. A seah is 12 pounds. So about this time tomorrow, 12 pounds of the finest flour will sell for 30 cents. They've had this horrible famine that it's been so bad that they're selling donkeys' heads for food, and it costs an exorbitant amount of money, and they're selling piles of dove dung as food, and it costs an exorbitant amount of money. And so he says, by this time tomorrow, things are going to be back to normal. And you just, that just can't happen, okay? And the man at the gate says, no, that can't happen. Right, so he says, this time tomorrow, 12 pounds of the finest flour will sell for 30 cents, or a shekel, and 24 pounds of barley for 30 cents at the gate of Samaria. The officer on whose arm the king was leaning said to the man of God, look, even if the Lord should open the floodgates of heavens, could this happen? And Elisha answers and says, you will see it with your own eyes, but you will not eat any of it. Now, there were 4 men with leprosy, and these are the least likely people in the whole world to save us here in this story, but these are the saviors in the story. They're the ones who find everything. Now, there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. They said to each other, why stay here till we die? If we say we'll go into the city, the famine is there, and we will die. And if we stay here, remember they're lepers, and if we stay here, we will die. So let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and surrender. If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, we die. Echoing Esther's words, if I perish, I'll perish. And echoing Mordecai's words, maybe you were made for such a time as this. Verse 5. At dusk, they got up and went to the camp of the Arameans. When they reached the edge of the camp, no one was there. For the Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and horses and a great army, so that they said to one another, look, the king of Israel has hired the Hittite and Egyptian kings to attack us. So they got up and fled in the dusk and abandoned their tents and their horses and their donkeys, and they left the camp as it was and ran for their lives. You think, well, what a bunch of cowards. These guys were out dressed up for battle. They were the ones they were trusting to go into battle. A bunch of chickens. They just run off at the least little sound. It's not been a least little sound. Can you imagine what that sounded like? They heard enough chariots and horses and the sound of battle that they ran for their lives. Verse 8. The men who had leprosy reached the edge of the camp. They entered one of the tents, ate, drank. Then they took silver, gold, clothes, and went off and hid them. Then they returned, came back to another tent, and they ate, they drank, and they took all the silver and the gold and all the clothes and hid them. Verse 9. Then they said to each other, what we're doing is not right. This is a day of good news, and we are keeping it to ourselves. If we wait until daylight, punishment will overtake us. Let us go at once and report this to the royal palace. So they went and called out the city gatekeepers and told them, we went to the Aramean camp and no one was there, not a sound of anyone, only tethered horses and donkeys in the tents, left just as they were. And the gatekeepers shouted the news, and it was reported within the palace. The king got up in the night and said to his officers, I will tell you what the Arameans have done to us. They know we are starving, so they have left the camp to hide in the countryside, thinking they will surely come out and then we will take them alive and get into the city. One of his officers said, make some men take 5 of the horses that are left in the city. Actually, these were the only 5 horses left in the city. They've eaten the rest. Their plight will be like that of all the Israelites left here. Yes, they will only be like all these Israelites who are doomed. So let us send them out to find what happened. So they selected 2 chariots with their horses, and the king sent them after the Aramean army. They followed them as far as the Jordan, and they found the whole road strewn with the clothing and equipment the Arameans had thrown away in their headlong flight. So the messengers returned and reported to the king. Then the people went out and plundered the camp of the Arameans. So a seah of the finest flour sold for a shekel because they had plenty. It's the old economics thing of supply and demand. They could sell food cheaply because they had so much. So a seah of the finest flour sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley sold for a shekel, as the Lord had said. Immediately it went back to normal. I just kept thinking of this story over and over and over during COVID, and I thought, there's gonna come a day where we open our eyes and things are just okay again. And we are still waiting for that perfect kind of okayness. But this happened immediately because God can do that. And we are the ambassadors. We're the lepers. We're Esther. We're the ones we're Mordecai, who says, hey, you go in there to the harem. Okay, so end of the story. It's sad, but it serves this guy kind of right, I guess. Now the king had put the officer on whose arm he leaned in charge of the gate. And the people, as they were going out to get all the food and clothes and weapons that were just loose in the road and loose in the camp, they trampled him in the gateway and he died. Just as the man of God, Elisha, had foretold when the king came down to his house. It happened as the man of God had said to the king. About this time tomorrow, a seah of the finest flour will sell for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria. The officer had said to the man of God, look, even if the Lord should open the floodgates of heavens, could this happen? And the man of God had replied, you will see it with your own eyes, but you will not eat any of it. And that is exactly what happened to him, where the people trampled him in the gateway and he died. You wonder why it said it 3 times. We had the prophecy, we had the actual story moving on, and then we had this recap at the end. Why did they say it 3 times? Because it's important. You can't mock God. You can't say, God can't do that, because he can. He is going to provide a way where there is no way. And back in the garden with Adam and Eve, he provided the way by making a blood sacrifice, just like he provides a way for us by making a sacrifice of his son. And so we have a way where before there was no way. And so I wonder if they repeated the verses from David, Psalm 109, 28 through 30. While they curse, may you bless. May those who attack me be put to shame. May your servant rejoice. May my accusers be clothed with disgrace and wrapped in shame as in a cloak. With my mouth I will greatly extol the Lord, and the great throng of worshipers I will praise him. And again, Psalm 30, 10 through 12. Dear Lord, and be merciful to me. Lord, be my help. You turned my wailing into dancing. You removed my sackcloth and clothed me with joy, that my heart may sing your praises and not be silent. Lord, my God, I will praise you forever. Being clothed with Christ means, 1, those who are with us are more than those who are against us. 2, there are people among us who were appointed for this time and this place. We each were appointed for this time and this place to do the right things that are necessary for God's right and holy purposes. 3, when we think all hope is lost, when we know and understand the risks and step out on faith saying, if I perish, I'll perish, then we know that our faith is real. We can't sit still. Fourth, we know that the plans of God don't match the plans of men. He can make a noise that we won't even expect. He can show his power. The chariots of fire are out there. And he is working even when we don't see it. And then fifth, Mordecai's one little piece of faith that we can learn from this is God will raise up someone, even if we refuse our duty. And so to be clothed with Christ means that we are ambassadors. We are the ones who receive everything we need. We've had the 6 months in oil of myrrh and the 6 months with cosmetics. We are in the right place at the right time to do the right things for God's right and holy purposes. He adds his glory to your glory. So that's the lesson for this evening. I'm sorry, I probably should ask for more discussion. It's interesting. Had you heard that story before? Was I the only one in the world who has not just dwelt on that story before? I probably had heard it, but
I've read it, but didn't really,
right.
think about it that much.
Yeah, and that's probably what I have done. I think I skipped it. One time I looked through my whole Bible and said, what book doesn't have anything underlined? Zechariah. It was so hard to read Zechariah then, but it was so good. And I thought, why have I never read this before? Okay, we've got 12 minutes. Let's go with some prayer requests. Y'all have prayer requests. Do we do this in this class? Since I'm new to this class.
Whitney Hershey just messaged our class and said that little Griffin had a seizure tonight and they're in the ER.
Whitney Hershey.
Yes.
And what's the
Griffin. They're trying to figure out what's going on. I think he's around like a month.
Yeah, I was gonna
Oh.
say, listen,
What? It's like a
so
month
little
old.
baby.
Yeah.
He's a newborn.
Mhm.
So what's going on with him?
He had a seizure tonight, and so they're in the ER right now, trying to figure out what's going on.
One of the teachers at school went in this morning for surgery. She had surgery before, and there was a really, really bad foot infection that came from the surgery that she had, a bone infection. And so they went in this morning, and we were kind of waiting to hear whether or not they had to amputate her foot. Or whether they were able to clean it off. And so, and get it back to, she said that the infection inside was really, really bad, and she had told them to go ahead and amputate if they needed to, but it's just kind of a pretty serious thing, so I'm not sure what happened there, but.
And so it's from the teachers. And what's his- My friend Ann Heddick is gonna have a double mastectomy.
My grandmother's also in the hospital.
And tell me her name.
Kayla.
First for my and Josie's dad, Rogelio, I think it's Ortiz, his potassium got a really high yesterday. So prayers that they're able to, he's back home, but prayers that they can figure out what to
We can close with this prayer for our friends. Holy Father in heaven, thank you so much for this time that we have to be together as women who love you and who love your word and who are seeking truth and who long to be with you. And we know that the way to be with you best right now is to study your word and to enter into your throne room with our prayers and requests. Help us to never take any of those things for granted and help us to be light among the people that we walk with each day so that they can see that your word and your presence are always with us. We bring to you tonight Whitney Hershey and the whole Hershey family, that their little baby Griffin has had a seizure, and we just want to pray for protection and for courage and faith in the little family that has this tiny little baby that is potentially so sick. And we just hope that it is just some anomaly that just happens and just is never explained. It just happened and goes away. That's really what we hope. And if that's not what it is, we want you to walk with them and to be their joy and be their courage for them on this path. We want to pray for Christina Janeway and her surgery that she had today and the infection in her foot and the possibility of an amputation. We know that's terrifying and just really a sad and scary thing. But maybe necessary. And if that is the cure, then help her to willingly accept that and to learn to live with that. We know that things happen all the time that we can struggle through and we can learn to live with your help and your mercy and your grace. And we know that our home in heaven is really the thing that matters. Be with my friend Anne Headache as she goes in for a double mastectomy, and just be with her, give her courage and strength, and just remind her of your promises of always being with her. Help her to just walk that path and help us to walk it with her with grace and courage and be an ambassador of you. Help her to shine her light as she always does. Be with Kayla's grandmother who's in the hospital, and Maria and Josie's dad and Mr. Ortiz as they are having some health struggles, and just be with them and give them courage and strength as well. Help us to always face things knowing that you are with us and that you hold us in the palm of your hand, and that we just walk with courage. Thank you for being our light and our life. Thank you for your blood sacrifice that you gave your son on the cross to be the keeper of our sin, the one who takes it away, and the one who buries it and never to be seen again. Thank you for being the one who is our Savior and our Redeemer and our friend. In Jesus' name, amen.